Two friends, Alan Dale and Jerry Carew, who grew up just a few streets apart in St. John's East End, have been separated by Canada's geography for 3 decades. They came together virtually during the pandemic to chat about like-minded interests. Alan lives in PEI and Jerry in Newfoundland. Thriving in remoteness has been a common theme for both of them during the pandemic. GaleForceWins, the podcast, is the result.
Charlie Oliver is a certified professional life coach, student of integral theory, mediator, and meditator, poet with 2 self-published works, trained in Reki, therapeutic touch, a lover of cycling, rollerblading, and he's a serial entrepreneur for over 40 years. Charlie's entrepreneurial evolution started mid-year 1981. He crafted Martek to provide startup solutions to young entrepreneurs. It strayed from its early course in its growth when confronted with identifying solutions to difficult real estate situations. It successfully established radical approaches to stagnant realty. Consulting led to management, led to leasing, led to sales. Through the times of challenging interest rates in the 80s, to the growth of the 90s, and the market tightening effects this new century, and now COVID, Martek and Charlie continue to act with professionalism, patience, and dedication. Charlie's evolution from the early days of Martek, helping young entrepreneurs, has come full circle, with him engaging in philanthropic endeavours around the globe, to just spending time with folks who need his ear right here in his own backyard. We have a great episode for you today with Charlie discussing critical inflection points, wicked problems and wicked solutions, balance in life, chasing risk, positive action. And the list goes on. But how about you watch for yourself? Hello, folks. We are back with GaleForceWins. Hello, Alan. How are you doing today?
Good meaning better, Jerry. How about you?
Oh, you know what? I'm excited. We are having a little bit of banter with our guest prior to. Alan has done a phenomenal job of getting guests. I've been kind of in the background. I have yet to dig into my contact list. I am extremely excited today to bring together Charlie Oliver and my good friend Alan on this podcast. Just a little bit of background. I first met Charlie back in the early 90s. He came to speak to a group, and it was a Positive Thinkers group. I recorded it, and then fast forward, didn't see you much, Charlie. Saw you on I guess a Board of Trade video, and 30 years later, the philosophies you were talking about were the same. So I had to reach out to you. And I want to say something. I really want to thank you publicly for what you did during the pandemic. Alan and I have known each other for 30 years. Alan and I had a lot of chats over the pandemic. What you did for me in terms of reaching out to me, I reached out to you and we had a banter and a couple of chats, and you giving me some leads for business was something that I really, really appreciated. And frankly, despite the fact I've had a 30-year career in advertising, I've been self-employed for pretty well all that time. I needed that little bit of a boost, and Charlie, you gave it to me. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast. I'm going to get you to introduce yourself in a second, but what I like about what I've seen in you is you have all the aspects of a business person, but you also have empathy for people. And I think that is needed more now than ever. So Charlie, if you don't mind, give us a little introduction, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry and Alan. Nice meeting you. You know, time is an absolute wonderful school and teacher. And back in the day when Jerry, you and I probably first crossed paths, it was kind of interesting. I was invited to give a breakfast monologue to Positive Thinkers Club, St. John's, Newfoundland. And the interesting message that I left with them after a fair bit of banter was that many, many people are positive thinkers. They got all these great ideas. They love the whole positive thing, but they miss the key ingredient, and that's called positive action. So what I've had in my life is the benefit of being, I guess, encased or encapsulated in actioning things that I think about or that I create, rather than sit back and watch other people doing them. So, Jury, back in those days, it was a piece of advice. Somebody comes to a positive thinkers club and they're eating bacon fried, eggs fried with white bread and butter, and they're telling me they're a positive thinker. I got a problem with that. So since then, just a quick thing, guys. I've been in business for pretty well 40 years. Started June 1981. I've been around and created 125, 135, 140 businesses. Some were sole purpose businesses, some were operating businesses, a lot were real estate. But over the course of time, you learn some of the key aspects of business, but the fundamental piece that keeps you around long, and this goes in our business lives and our personal lives, is that you base yourself on integrity, ethics, and morals. So you start with that. Who am I? I have solid integrity, phenomenal ethics, and my morals are where they should be. So that's probably a grounding. And we can talk on the definition of success. And success is, are you happy? Are you healthy? Are you treating the people around you with respect and care and concern? And success should never be someone has made $1 million or $100 or $1 billion. So success, by its very definition, in my 40 years of business, has changed from wanting to make cash to how do I incorporate and integrate with all the people in my community and my friends to help everybody have a better position in life. So throw it at your jury as an opening.
Well, there's so much that I want to ask. I know I'm not going to get to all of it, but I want to ask the one thing that really intrigues me. So prior to starting your business, you did a business degree and you were working for the government, correct?
I was indeed. I was working at Municipal Affairs and Housing worked in what is now Grant Thornton. I worked in a CA firm long enough to know that I did not want to drive my vehicle looking in the rearview mirror. Because back in those days, a chartered accountant was a historian, not a futurist. So out of that, in government, 3.5 years, Municipal Affairs and Housing, 2 years, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. And then I left to start my own business. And that was in June of 1981.
How was that? I guess. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Al.
How was that transition coming out of government, starting your own business at an early age?
Well, in my particular case, I came out of CMHC, which, believe it or not, back then, as a crown corporation, had at its essence an entrepreneurial flair within it.
Right.
So the municipal government piece, not as much as in Municipal Affairs and Housing. But so coming out of the Crown Corp was you're coming out of a pretty independent, interdependent work environment to myself. But I've never, ever had any concern about succeeding. I just aim, shoot, go, right?
Right. So that, okay, let me pick up on that for a second, Charlie, because that's fascinating, right? A lot of people, that's where they stop right there, right? And you go back to the positive action piece, right? That's where they stop. There's that. They want to do their own thing. They want to get out there. They want to be an entrepreneur, but they're just afraid of making that initial step. I don't know if they're afraid of failure. And these are not, I'm not talking about people just out of university. I'm talking about people that are established and have careers and have had great success in their career, but they're still afraid to make that step out. I was that guy not so long ago. I had done a very lengthy career in the military. I stepped out into private sector where I worked for a company. Then I went into an academic institution. And in the back of my mind, I knew I wanted to start my own business. I never took the step. But when I took the step, Charlie, my God, it's been the best decision I've ever made. I've never felt more professionally fulfilled as I do now. How did you know that so early, and how do you tell people about that now? How do you give them that piece of advice?
Yeah. Well, that's a loaded line to answer. Let's unpack it in several ways.
Sure.
Number one, the universe will co-conspire with you to make you succeed at what's in your best interests. So the universe will co-conspire. So that's a bit of metaphysics, a bit of quasi-spiritual stuff with real grounded business stuff. So you got to know that. When I decided to walk out of CMHC, I went out and started a business with somebody else, but I left to start my own business. It was not an assumption would I succeed or fail. It's just, this is the business I want to start with. And intuitively, inherent inside of me was the knowledge that I would create many businesses. So that's just there. So you find where your spirit or your soul or your passion is, and you let that guide you. And there's many out there who can give you all philosophy on business, saying, if you work hard enough at something and it's successful, it becomes your passion. Then it's the other side saying, if you have your passion, you will work hard enough to get it. There's semantics. And so what each of us have to get comfortable with inside our own skin is to decide what is success for us and what's important for us. If your success, Alan, is to make $1 million a year, and in so doing it, you will create yourself cardiac stress issues where you're unhappy and unhealthy, or you can make yourself $50,000 a year and be absolutely healthy and happy. You have to look in the mirror and say, what is my definition of success? So that's one thing. Two things. The third is failure. Failure is the best teacher on the face of the planet.
Yeah.
And failure, and I remember I did a seminar years ago, again, I think it was for the Board of Trade, and it was called, Crash Like a Kid, The Art of Failing Forward.
Right.
And in it, metaphorically, but also we had videos of these young kids, 16 years old, 15 years old, learning how to BMX stunt bike. And the only way you can learn to BMX stunt bike is by falling, failing, and crashing. And each of those failures led to how not to do something or how to do something better. We as human beings have a sad reality in that we judge who we are, not so much in our eyes, but in what we perceive the other person's eyes are seeing about us. So we tend to give away our power on many, many fronts. This is in relationships, personal, business, but also in the ability to chase risk. So if we go out and we are concerned that I'm going to fail, you yourself don't mind that.
Mm-hmm.
It's what will Jerry think about Alan if he failed?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to learn how to rise above that. And in Newfoundland, we got this great lobster saying, and that, we all want to support everybody who's rising up to get out of the barrel before you get thrown in and boiled.
Mm.
But please don't get to the ridge because we'll pull you back down. Yeah. And again, that's an old traditional mindset that we have. So what you got to do is unshackle yourself from other people's perspectives and opinions of yourself, ground yourself in integrity, ethics, and morals, and proceed along your passionate highway. So if you got that as a base, then you can say, okay, what is my skill? What skill sets do I bring to the table? And how do I manifest them in a way that is solid ethically, will get the metrics that will help generate income and profit for me? And profit is not a bad word. Excessive profits is a bad word. But fair and reasonable profits is where we should be. So if you're going down and you merge those factors together, then you pursue your life. The idea of making money is wonderful. And I talk to many of my friends who've got, 20, 25, and 30-year-old sons and daughters. And they're all about, I want my son or daughter to get this degree, to work here, to make this much money. And that was a great paradigm years ago. we've got a young guy, he's 28 years old, doing sociology right now. And it's always, the question comes home is, what do I do to make a living? What do I do to earn my income, and so on? And I keep trying to orient that thought and that conversation to, what do you want to do? Forget the money piece. Where's your passion taking you? Where does that lead you? Because sometimes you chase a dollar bill,
Right.
rather than chasing your passion. And you, Alan, can probably say, I found my passion at this age of my life. Damn, why didn't I find it 10 years ago?
Right. Yeah, no, 100%. And it's interesting. Everything you just said resonates very well with me, for sure. And I'm excited about that, because I see in the next generation of kids coming up that appetite to try something and fail early and move on and learn from it. I see that now in my kids. I see that in other people, the young people that I interact with. And I think it's such an interesting approach. I didn't have that when I was 17, 18, 19, 20. I think you had to do everything correct. Now, I was in a very structured environment, of course, but I enjoy seeing that right now. So that's a really interesting thing to pass on to that generation, to say, give it a try. And it may not work out the way you want it to be, but learn from it as you went and make it better. And you're so bang on about, and Jerry and I talked about this a lot during the throes of the pandemic. What is success? What is the measurement of success? Everybody's is different, but at the end of the day, it's a personal thing. And I look at my mother-in-law, and I see, or my sisters, and I see the grandkids all around them coming to their house, and pictures on the wall. To me, it is a true measurement of success. It's a life well lived, right? And that, to me, is a measurement of success. And everybody's is a little bit different, but those are great words for sure. Jerry, your thoughts on them?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've had a 30-year career. I've been in sales. I mean, I started out with nothing, no background in sales, but I'll never forget it, Charlie. A guy came into Munn and he said, sales is the engine that drives the economy. And it grabbed a hold of me. I can't even remember who it was, but I've been 30 years now chasing that dream, and it's worked out really well for me. I will say that the pandemic slowed me down significantly for the first time in 30 years. I reflect on it. There's challenges because of it. Overall, I will say that I think the experience has been a good one, because, Alan, when you start talking about pictures on the walls, I look at my children, and my 17-year-old, I know him well, but I wasn't necessarily as there as I could have been. And I really, really want to structure the rest of my life to be there for the people that matter around me. And I'm feeling blessed that I have that opportunity, Charlie. When I hear you say, you created 140 businesses, I can't even fathom that. I've created one business that's been going for 30 years. That being said, I've worked for others that I've helped develop. What I like with what Alan and I are doing with this GaleForceWins is we've created something. And my youngest boy did a bit of the voiceover, which you'll hear later. But I said to him, you know what, Sebastian? Alan and I have created something. So the challenge, Charlie, I see is, it's one thing to create it, but to keep something going like you've done. And how do you stay motivated in a business that you created in 1981?
Great question.
Yeah. And guys, there's a whole bunch of substance that come out of this, and we can get through all this in an hour. It'll be amazing. But you say something and it stimulates me.
Yeah.
So let's just go back, first of all, to what you're doing. It is a beautiful task in life to reach out, to touch somebody, and to tweak their imagination, their passion, their love, their awareness, their respect. That's so if we can just hone in on that for a second, that part of our existence as human beings is fundamental to whatever we do.
Mm-hmm.
COVID And Jerry, you were on some of my conversations earlier this year. We did some video work for the local board of trade, but we needed to focus more on the emotional aspects of COVID than people were doing. So I decided to step outside of my left brain logical business persona and come out over to my spiritual, creative, emotional, empathetic thing. And let's put out knowledge, awareness, and talking, thinking, feeling points for our community. So what you talk about, pictures on the walls, family, it was so great. So COVID, in a very interesting way, is a blessing for our society.
100%.
Now, the sickness, don't like. The death, don't like. The crashing of businesses, don't like. But if we can just containerize that and package that here for a second, it's taken our global 7.2 billion people and had us slow down and focus and ask themselves this question: what is the most important thing in my life? Followed by a corollary, comma, because I might die tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So if we could all ground ourselves in the reality that we are, and we may talk a bit of Buddhism later, but we are one breath, one heartbeat, one thought away from not being here. Any one of us at any given time. Our ego, ego, edging good out, our ego likes to presume falsely, that it will live forever, and it keeps writing our storybook for us. COVID split the film down and said, stop for a moment. So when stopping for a moment, what do you focus on? Guess what? You're at home with your family or close to your family, or you're home by yourself if you happen to be so, if that's your lifestyle. What do you do at that moment in time? The journey that most people take is into themselves, into their families, into that essence which causes you to tick. So what did that lead you to? So who am I? Where am I going? What's my purpose? And what is my very personal legacy? And that could be that I am giving unconditional loving to my son, or to my daughter, or to my spouse, or, pray tell, to myself.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than collapse around COVID and go, woe is me, those who've been in my circle and been around some of the things that I've tried to promote is focus more on your health. Cook some better food. Have better conversations. Explore the things that you did not explore before. Now, all of that is essential before you go and jump out and take on the business world, your jobs and your careers. Because without having some self-grounding, self-awareness, self-perspective, self-understanding, it's really hard to manifest your own destiny, to create your own personal legacy. So if I can leave that with you for a comment, then.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, listen, it's funny that you turn it around and explain COVID from that context, because people ask me, how I've done in the last year of COVID, and I sometimes I find it hard to say, almost embarrassing to say, professionally and personally, it's been the best year of my life. Honest to God, it was that time that I was able to slow down, reconnect with the things that mattered to me. And one of those things was myself. Learn to meditate, learn all of those skills. And it has been a tremendously rewarding experience. Now, I know others struggle and are struggling through COVID and on different levels. But for me, people ask me, how is COVID? And I can't help but think it's been an incredibly rewarding time for me. So your points are very, very well taken. Charlie, I want to dive into a little bit about the business side. I mean, clearly you're a creative thinker. Clearly the innovation is oozing through your personality as we speak. I guess where do we find ourselves right now where we have there's never been a time more important to have visionaries like yourself engaged in the conversation so that we can move from the place we are right now, which is it's for many, I would call it a blank canvas again. We're a blank canvas. We've allowed ourselves that time to settle, to rethink, to look at where we want to go, to be agile, to maybe pivot in the direction that we want to go in our business, in our communities, in our governments, in our interactions with one another. Talk to me a little bit about where you see creativity, innovation, visioning coming into the future, because you're a guy that has that. Explain to me where that fits in.
Yeah. Well, people always look at other people and call them visionaries or call them creators. And that happens as a product of circumstance and environment. So, like, it's been my belief in my businesses and in my personal life that everybody is a creator. Everybody has that inherent essence in a field that differs from everybody else. So we have to understand we have that. Mm-hmm. The challenge that we have to overcome is to let that bubble up and resonate. So the background is so critical. If I have a project in my company or companies, I give it to staff who probably don't have any training to solve it, but empower them to do and follow their thought process on it and come up with a recommendation, suggestion, or creation, and then bounce it by other people with no rights, no wrongs. In our lives, we have to be doing that with a comfort. Again, it goes back to the conversation of failure. Don't worry about the failure. The failure is okay. We don't need to make the same mistake twice. Let's make them once and learn from them, but let's do that. So I can say to Jerry, I can say to you, we can say to any of the millennials out there, that each and every person has the creative energy. The problem we don't do, and COVID brought this to a lot of our lives, is it forced us to get into that now moment. And the now moment is the place and space where we are empowered to create and to dream and to imagine things. And the only time we can get there, only is probably a bit too precise, but the best place for us to be there. And you mentioned you learn to meditate. So meditation is a way to get to a place whereby you hit your creative energies. Quick little brain thing. We have 4 brainwave patterns, generally speaking: beta, alpha, theta, delta. The 3 of us in a conversation right now are at beta. So our brainwave patterns are pretty fast. And as we meditate, we move down from beta to alpha, theta. Delta, we go to sleep, and then we come back into beta in rapid eye movement. But so BAT, think of a flying bat. In alpha and theta, the brainwave patterns go from this to something like this, and they slow down again. And Jerry, if you recall, when we did the Board of Trade presentation, I had a real cool little graphic to show this. So what happens is when you get down into alpha and theta, and I don't mean to be technical, but we give you an example how to get there quickly. That's where you can create. That's where you dream. That's where your ideas, suggestions, and solutions come from. And as long as you stay there, you still get all these things. But if you stay there and don't come up into beta, you'll never action them.
Right.
So we know poets and artists and so on who were in that zone, and Pablo Picasso was in that zone, never ever manifested making money because he was always in the zone.
Right, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So you have to learn how to bring yourself down to become creative and how to come back out to action it, go back down and be creative.
That's your positive action, right? That's where it is.
Yeah.
That's where positive action takes place. So COVID forced many people on the planet to get into that quiet space. And that can be doing any number of things. Mm-hmm. So if you go for a walk and you focus only on your breathing, or you get on your treadmill, or you jog, you do whatever you want. Bike, I'm a biker, so you pedal bike. Once you get into a zone where you're thinking of nothing but what you're doing, you're on a big step to being meditative. And meditation is all about being in the moment. It's
100%.
being there. So if we can walk ourselves and learn how to be in the moment, then guess what? What happened yesterday doesn't exist because I'm in the moment. And what's going to happen tomorrow is not there because I'm in the moment. And the challenge, and Buddhism is fabulous on this, is it teaches you meditative principles and practices that get you in the moment. So in your life, in my life, if someone gives me a business deal and something is going wrong, rather than go and react, stop, get into the moment, be with it, understand it, feel it, drop down in alpha, theta, let it guide you, and you may not get an answer immediately, but you will, and then you come out and action it. What happens with most of us, we allow all of our thoughts of the past, and and they're usually negative ones we bring out, and all of our expectations of the future, believe it or not, more so negative, and we try to compress them all into the now moment.
Yeah.
And we're needing to say, oh my God, I need a shot of whiskey. I need some Valium or Librium because I cannot handle it. And when you get down to the exercise, you can only think about one thing at a time. So what we have to do, and Buddhists use this cool term called the monkey brain, the monkey mind. And the monkey mind is like this.
Yeah.
All of it. And we got to learn to quieten that down so it becomes one moment. And meditation is generally about not thinking.
Yeah.
You observe a thought go by, but you don't enter it.
Right.
Now I'm being very simple in that for this
Yeah.
dialogue and your potential audience. But to be quiet, to sit in silence is so powerful that we need to do it more often. And if you sit down and go around the world and say, well, who's got it mastered? Well, the whirling dervishes got it mastered, and they do it by spinning. And they get in the moment. And in that moment, they are balancing the body chakras, another subject, another day, and it grounds them to the universe, a secondary subject, another day. Buddhist chant. It's another access point to meditation. We can go through many different processes. Some in the Indian belief system will sit and stare at either, Gandhi or a flame.
Yeah.
The idea is to get your mind focused and stopping.
But Jesus, Charlie, there's a lot of things to take us out of the moment, right? I mean, there really is. And that's the interesting thing about the pandemic. Back to that. It really allowed us that. It allowed us to settle down. That is truly the beautiful thing that in my mind has come out of all of this. It has allowed us to settle and allowed us now to take that next step, which is what you're really talking about, because you're right. It's turbulent, right? Everything that we do every day, it's turbulent. It's the top of the ocean. And as we get deeper down into our thoughts, everything settles down and you get down in there. And that's where the decisions can be made in a proper method. But boy, is that ever a hard thing to do when you're when you're struggling with those things, right?
Absolutely. You take people who are not getting salaries, people who are in the restaurant industry that are suffering.
Yeah.
Every single person has their own unique challenges.
Right.
But if you drop yourself normally into this precise moment in time you're in today, you're breathing, your heart's beating, you're thinking, you have a health level. I don't know what that is, but it could be better, it could be worse, but you're there.
Yeah.
Your business may be going bankrupt, but not bankrupt, or you may be bankrupt, but still alive. Yeah. But when you get into the essence of it, you say, I am present now.
Right.
And so coming out is, what's my next step? And you try to take that gently, so on. But we always think of the worst. Now, We got 7.2 billion people on the planet, of which I'd say 1 billion are challenged with, food, shelter, clothing. The basic Maslow hierarchy needs they're missing. We are landed gentry in North America. On a bad day, we're doing good. And on a good day, we should be sharing with everybody. But come back to the moments for a second. Cool little exercise. Topic is, again, mindfulness. Topic another day. When you get a glass of water, when you go to drink a glass of water the next time, take 5 minutes from the time you think about it till the time you put the glass back down, and think of every single thing that's happening in a very microscopic way, and see how you feel after doing that. One glass of water. Thich Nhat Hanh is a Buddhist monk, runs a retreat in Plum Village in the Dordogne in France. And he has a real cool metaphor for life, and that is wash the dishes. And when you wash the dishes, spend the time washing the dishes. There's nothing else. There's nothing else in your life at that moment in time.
Yeah.
It takes you 25 or 30 minutes to wash 3 plates, then you're getting the idea.
Charlie, you talk about biking. Do you get, like, I bike too, and it's one of the things that if I miss it in a day, I something is off for me, because I find that time with myself, just biking, pedaling, just me and the bike. I love it. It gets me in that moment. Do you get that same thing?
And everyone who bikes and runs or jogs should.
Yeah.
So what happens is you ultimately focus on your breathing. And then after a while, you're focused on nothing.
Yeah.
That's the part that's so beautiful about it. Yet there are people who will bike and they keep the monkey mind going.
Yeah.
They're thinking about a business deal, or thinking about cooking supper. But if you are in the moment and focused and there, it's so important.
Yeah.
But if we want to pass out some really, keepers for people who listen to this or me and others, like, we all have to focus on being balanced in our lives. And the balance piece needs to be chased consciously. So I'm an eccentric person, and I admit that fully. But for 30 years minimum, I have relatively religiously been at a gym in the morning, 4 to 5 mornings a week, at 6:15 to 6:30. So I weight train to start my day. That's part of my routine, part of my culture. And yes, I did own the gym and created the gym initially, part of a little investment piece there. But you also got to eat properly. You have to relate properly, and that's in your personal life, and it's also in your corporate life. So if you take these things, which are sounding kind of corny from a guy who supposedly the business, the entrepreneur with attention deficit disorder, these are the elements that your base is built on. So you got a physically strong body, you got a spiritually strong body with some practices that become yours. And whatever practices you have, honor and respect them, and honor and respect somebody else's practices. And whether that's, if you look over my shoulder here, we've got, this is done by a grade 5 class in Dehradun, India, at a school that we're involved in. They are a mixed Buddhist Christian society over there, and they appreciate what each other culture does in their spiritual based practices. So respect and honor the other persons, but do it. So whatever yours is, do it. And if yours is nothing, then do nothing and focus on nothing for a while. So eat well, spiritual based, physical side, relationship side. You got to be open and living. And we always say, what is our purpose on the planet? And I love the answer to that. And if you want to have a takeaway at the end, this is it. We are here to do 2 things only, and only 2 things. One is to give and theretofore love unconditionally. And in order for us to give and love unconditionally, we have to equally receive and take unconditionally from those offering it, because it creates the balance of life, the circle of life.
Charlie, you're an enlightened guy. Did you always were you always thinking this way, or has this marinated over time and to the place you are now?
Yeah. Alan, that's a question I can answer easily. I'm going to start at the end and come back to the beginning.
Sure.
My belief is that my way of exiting this planet is going to be like a bug in a windshield, and lashing through my brain is what I'm sitting on. In a likewise fashion, when I was 16 years old, my 15-year-old brother died of appendicitis. Was given penicillin, which was allergic to. Anyway, he died. Unexpected, just boom, bug in a windshield. At that moment in time, for whatever reason, my consciousnness chose to live my life and to adopt and live his. So I look at that as being as a term in business called critical inflection point. That was my critical inflection point. I was between my first semester of university and my second. And when I went back to university into my second semester, my focus was on all of the business stuff, but I also then focused on reading and understanding world's religions and belief systems. So Hinduism, Taoism, Christianity. I've been a student of Kabbalah more recent years, but I spent 2 or 3 years studying Kabbalah and understanding the subset of Judaism. And all of it puts together and creates a different creature. And being enlightened, like, we love to put terms that get people to say, I am better than somebody else because of this. And that's, we got to be really careful with that. Like, I am no better than nor worse than anybody on this planet. And everybody else on this planet is no better or no worse than me. And when we can beat the crap out of our ego to live and believe that system, then we got it. But what we tend to do as human beings is we try to elevate Elon Musk, or we try to elevate somebody else because they have what? Made money, or they're creators. Like, do I respect what a great cardiologist does? Absolutely. But guess what? He's no better and no worse than Alan Dale or Jerry Carew. So it's to get yourself in there. So when people come to my business and call me Mr. or Sir, say, oh, stop. Here's my name. Okay? And so if you take that and that's with you through your life, you do not talk down to anybody. You do not talk up to anybody. You talk to the guy in the street who's asking you for money. And people ask you, why do you give the guy on the street money? He might go buy rum or he might buy whiskey. I say, hey, ho. My focus is on me giving. What that person does with it is none of my concern. It's the intention of the gift, not the expectation of what the receiver does with it. So you got to take that and bundle all of that up. And yeah, we can still talk business.
So, I mean, sorry, Jerry, I'm fascinated, buddy. I
know you are. I'm just letting you go, Alan.
Yeah. So, now in business, I respect that. I mean, I respect your ability to go left brain, right brain on these things. Not everybody can do that 100%. And I know that in business, there's times when it gets dicey and it gets, complicated. And even in my military service, I found myself in times where it was dicey and complicated. And upon reflection on my leadership style and things, I knew there was times I could have done things better. Do you find yourself in that situation?
No. Again, I'm an off-the-moment person, and I think that we make our best decisions at the time we're engaged. And if you go back and say, if I went back and to do something again, would I do it differently? I probably would. Would it be better or worse? one never knows.
Hmm.
So, like I've created in all the business I've created, I think I had one that we actually closed down. And we closed it down without leaving any debt, but we closed it down because it would not work. It cost me a lot of money, but I would not see somebody else owed money, even though I was protected by the benefits of being in an incorporated entity. But see, our focus has got to be on what is the best decision at that moment in time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, we, and this, again, another topic for another day, it's a topic of how do we deal with problems that are massive in our business and in our political world and in our general world. And there's a term called wicked problems. And that's, everybody should Google it, go down the wormhole and experience it. But a wicked problem is a problem that can only be solved by a wicked solution. And when you employ a wicked solution, guess what? You create more wicked problems.
Yeah.
And that's where we are in our economy. Those who enter politics don't understand wicked problems, should not be in politics.
Right.
Because there's no line in the sand to say I've solved the deficit. There's no line in the sand to say I've solved poverty. There's no line in the sand to say I've solved childhood obesity or diabetes. They're not lines in the sand. So we need to take an approach on those. And that's a similar approach in business. So you make the best decision you can with the data and the information you have available, and make the decision and go on. My staff have always been amazed by the fact to come into me with something and I will make a decision immediately, 99.9% of the time, because why do I want to revisit something? I got the facts on the table. Something might change next week. I can't deal with that in the moment.
Yeah.
So we don't revisit stuff. I do not want an email coming back to me for a second opinion.
Right.
So it becomes part of a personality type, but we can all be there. It's not that complicated.
Charlie, sorry, I got to interrupt you. You reminded me of something. In my 30 years of advertising, there was this gentleman who was running a very large business. And I went into his office and I said, "You have no paper on your desk." And he was a very gruff gentleman. He tall, about 6'5". He said, "Jerry, I have a touch paper once policy."
Mm-hmm.
What the hell does that mean? He said, "If you bring a piece of paper to me," he said, "you better not bring it back to me a second time." And anyway, it was a phenomenal. So related to what you're saying, you're making those decisions, and why should you revisit them? Why? Waste
They're right
time.
or wrong. They're right or wrong. You can't anchor yourself to it. Move on to the next one.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if you make enough decisions, you're going to score on them. Like if you look at I'm not a sport. I don't follow sports. I'm a sport guy myself. But baseball, I'd say if someone's hitting a 35% batting average, they're pretty successful. Okay, that's just out there.
Right.
Well, guess what? They strike out 65% of the time.
Yeah.
And what do? They get up and bat 100% of the time.
Yeah.
You get up to bat, rise to the occasion, deal with it, move on. I'm thinking that, you got a higher probability of succeeding in life, is in relationships, is in everything. So,
Charlie, one thing that frustrates me a lot in relations with the government and stuff is the lack of decision making, that paralysis to make decisions. And I find that the country slows down when we can't make the decisions, we can't move it in the right direction economically. What is your advice to that decision paralysis, that fear of making a decision so that somebody might disagree with them, or politically it might not be the right decision, but it seems to me like we're just so afraid to make a decision in this country and move in a direction. I always use the expression, the dogs bark, but the caravan passes through. Like, we got to get going. Let those dogs yap away. But it seems like in this country right now, not only are we stopped, but we're patting the dogs. We're not moving. We're patting the dogs that are barking at us. What's your advice there?
Oof. I just had a conversation half hour before we started with a reporter, and we're going to talk next week or the week after on the politicians, politics, and policy. a politician, as you know from your experience, is a popularity contest with nice people running, with eyes south of the border most of the time. And they win the popularity contest by telling the population what they want to hear. So you go run, somebody else runs, and you get yourself up on a pedestal, and people will listen to what you say. If they like what you say, they'll vote for you. We are not in our democracy at a stage where we will go up and say, here is what we need to do to blend and balance our social programs with our health programs, with our fiscal programs. We don't do that. And a lot of the reason we don't do it is because most of us haven't taken the time to understand the interplay between education and poverty and deficits. We don't get it. So what everybody has been conditioned to more and more and more and more in our democracy is a dependency upon government, which we elect nice people telling us what we want to hear, but not what we need to do. So we end up living in a world of deficit financing. We end up putting hospitals and buildings in places that don't make sense other than for politics. And the reason we do is if we don't do that, we don't get elected. Someone else goes in. So you got yourself this never-ending circle of voting in somebody who is nice and lovely and tells me what I want to hear, rather than the opposite. It's like going to your cardiologist and he won't tell you that you have 4 blockages because you won't pay him. But if you pay, he wants to get the extra $2,000 or $3,000 by saying you're healthy.
What a great analogy.
That's a good analogy, yeah.
But it's where we are. So again, judgment aside, because none of us are empowered by whatever maker we want to call our maker to be judges. We are not judging other people. But we need to sit back and how do we cross-educate people to understand that we need to balance the incomes that we make individually and as a province and as a country with the money that we spend. And the analogy, Jerry, another good example, and we as provinces experience this. 2 people are working, round numbers, making $50,000 each, making $100,000 a year each. They live a lifestyle at $100,000 a year. One of those 2 get laid off and their income drops to $50,000 a year. In their own environment, they will immediately adjust to compensate for that difference. And the person out of work will try to get another job that may get them in at $30,000. But they will adjust their lifestyle to compensate for that. If you take a province that has an industry that's going along and it's booming and it's spending, and that industry slows down and or stops, the people inside of that community expect the same benefits and services. So they try to keep spending but don't have the income.
So, Charlie, I'm going to pick up on a point you said because I'm fascinated. You're right. You're right. We elect people that tell us what we want to hear. But what we saw 4 years ago in the United States was an entire population that was sick and tired of people telling them what they wanted to hear. They wanted a straight talking guy who understood business, who could solve this problem, who could right this ship, and they brought him in. And now personality, he did not have the personality for that position or whatever we might think. But at the end of the day, we come up again to an election a few weeks ago. Half the population are still saying they do not want the status quo. They were happy enough that they went through all of that chaos that they were willing to vote for that fella again. They're sending a clear message. They don't want to be fed with a spoon anymore that this is all working. How do we get out of this? If we know this is happening around us, how do we as Atlantic Canada, let's just start there. How do we as Atlantic Canada get out of this?
We frozen.
Jerry Allen.
Okay, you're back.
Yep, you're back. Did you hear
Jerry,
that?
you'll have to edit that momentary.
That was pausing for effect.
I thought we broke you.
you blew his mind with that question, Alan.
No. So the answer to the question is we may need to do another podcast. So, and this gets heavy and we'd have to simplify it. We as human beings are going through and have always been going through a growth in our levels of consciousness, our levels of awareness. And as we move through these levels of awareness, we'll go up and down through them. And we tend to be, and in the United States of America in a big way, we have returned a little tiny bit down to a different level of consciousness, which focuses a bit more on meat, potatoes, bullying, control, physical control.
Yeah, it's right down to the base, isn't it?
And moved out of the cerebral, emotional, caring pieces. And I've got terms and labels, and I can run you through how it works and how we evolve and so on. But that's the cerebral academic response to it from a concept called integral philosophy. So we're going to be evolving perpetually. And it's going to be people at different levels at different times. And again, this is non-judgmental. And whether I'm at level 1 or level 5, I'm still equal. It's just that we got a different way to communicate, a different language, a different set of parameters, a different set of understandings. So, you know, how does one get world peace is a big question. How do you die happy is a bigger question. And they all come from the same answer as how do we live? So it's a loaded question, and it can take a lot of different approaches to it. We tend to try to simplify everything and say, why is it that, 75 million Americans are voting this way and 85 that way? And no one breaks down to 75 to vote on one side, because perhaps only 35 or 40 million only have that strong belief. Some people vote, I'm not voting there anyway. I don't care who's there. So you got the vote against and the voting for. The reality is we need to come back to homeostasis or balance. And it's a challenge. And if we look inside of Atlantic Canada, where the three of us are sitting, the reality is we need to ground ourselves in our reality. And our reality is that we have significant provincial debt per capita. In our province, Newfoundland, we have got a large geographic area to provide roads, bridges, ferries, highways that is not sustainable under the current model. Now, can it be sustainable another way? Possibly. But under the current model, it is not sustainable. But if you live on a small remote island, you're going to say, well, I'm entitled to access, egress, as I've always had. Even though 40, 30 years ago, there was 5,000 of you there, and now there's only 200. The cost of providing some of these is the same. So we got a day of reckoning coming, but hopefully it'll be one of which we can understand it and say, okay, how do we solve that? And that becomes a wicked problem, which we referenced before, and needs to approach from a different perspective.
Yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
I just want to, just in conscious of Charlie's time, we're I knew that this was going to be a phenomenal conversation, Charlie. And I really, enjoyed Alan introducing you to Charlie. A couple of things come to mind, Charlie, is for me, I've had the benefit. I had a critical inflection point when I was 14. My dad died. Huge challenge. For some reason, I was given the benefit of an incredible mom who kept me together. It took me about 10 years. By the time I was 26, I was back together, frankly, and started a little tiny video business on the side. I struggle with people who have a lot, have had a very stable upbringing. They've been given a job, or they've earned their right to have a job, but they don't do anything extra. And I struggle with coming outside myself in terms of, I know what I've been able to accomplish, and I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just saying, if some of the youth, and what I've been doing is I go on Facebook and I look at some of the groups that are out there, particularly Newfoundland, there seems to be some of the youth that have given up. Oh, the government this and the government that. So I'm bringing it back to that conversation. You know, I have never wanted a handout from anyone. And I'm proud at the age of 54, almost 55, that I've earned every cent. What I wonder about is, especially in Newfoundland, sorry, Alan, I know you're in PEI, but Atlantic Canada as a whole, but Newfoundland in particular needs more innovation and more positive action. And I think, Charlie, you know, I really appreciate what it is you've said to us here today.
I love the positive action. It's exactly what we need, right? So, Jerry, the question, is there a question in there?
Well, I think I'm trying to bring it to a conclusion for this episode.
Okay.
And I guess, Alan, maybe I'll let you ask another question, and then Charlie, you can respond, and then I'll clue it up, just in the interest of time.
And if you guys want to do another one another time, we can make the time for this. It's not, it doesn't cut in too much on my life and my day. And again, if we're able to provide any semblance of a spark for somebody
100%
to create, or a little different perspective to remove pressures and so on. Like the essence of who we are as individuals is that, and I keep saying it, we are all equal. We are all meant to co-conspire to help and assist each other where we can. And like the world that we've been in is full of stress. COVID has brought us back to having more dialogues like this than before. And if this keeps going, then that's a benefit of that, infliction, if you want to call it that. So the thing is and to come back a little bit, Jury, in what you're saying, and again, another topic, another day, but the education system, in my opinion, and I've said it over and over again, is not designed to ferment and percolate and enhance the entrepreneurial energies that we're born with. Again, my opinion, and I'll stand on this and I'll argue with educators today, is that our system educates out of people entrepreneurialism. And my stated line on this, when you fall out of the crib, you got a 50% chance of being an entrepreneur or not. When you come out of high school, that's down to 25%.
Yeah.
When you go to business school and you come out of business school, that's down to 12.5%. And pray till you go get an MBA is down to 5%. Now, why
forgive any MBAs are going to watch this, but anyway, yes.
MBAs, commerce grads, professors, PhDs, listen clearly. You, by your very nature of living, teach risk aversion.
Yeah.
Risk aversion. It comes out of the mindset of people to avoid risk. We entrepreneurs embrace risk. So what you need to do is not how to avoid risk, but teach risk mitigation and opportunity identification. And if you do that, you're better. Like, I'm a graduate business degree. It was all about risk aversion back in the day. And if you talk to any high school student today, it's risk aversion. Where do you get a job? I want to get a job in government. Why? It's risk-free. God love you. Okay? So And I know that's a powerful statement to make against the academia world, but I make it to the profs at university when I talk to them here. It's been my mantra with the Board of Trade. The academic system needs to talk about opening up, look at the ideas, and you chase them.
Fascinating, Charlie. So bang on. I couldn't agree with you more on those points. I have a question, a very specific question. Is there a time in someone's life to take risk? Is there better times than others to take risk? How would you address that question?
As we age, we become more risk averse. So when I was a 35-year-old businessman and I'm investing in a project, my risk aversion says if it fails, I have 20 good years of work to make it up.
Right.
When you're 55, you have to look at that and say, if I go in now and I lose, I'm losing 20 years of earnings or growth. So you become biologically, mentally, intellectually more risk averse as you get older. And understand risk aversion gets quantified. If you are worth $100,000 and you're going to risk $10,000, not an issue at any age.
Right.
Okay. So that piece, but it's relative. If you risk 50% of your net worth at 35 and 50% of your net worth at 55, assuming normal growth, it's a bigger potential. So the best time to take risk is as a young, energetic business person. And that's why, like my company, myself, I'm focused on millennials as being partners with me. So I'm 68 and they're in their young 30s to go and do stuff that I can provide them with a bit of knowledge and a bit of cash and a bit of this. They got the ideas that are phenomenal and they got the energy and the effervescence to drive it. And so taking like the 68-year-old with the 35-year-old, if they're of kindred spirits,
it's a nice collision.
It's unlimited. The potential is unlimited.
Yeah, it's a nice collision. Do you find, Charlie, at 68 that you're learning a lot from them?
Oh my God, it's expansive.
Yeah.
And what we all have to do is stop with this thing, I know it, and say, I don't know it. Yeah. And listen to it and get involved and engage and challenge and let them have the elasticity to push back. Mm-hmm. I got a young guy down in my shop, 31 years old, and he hesitates from time to time about engaging with me. I said, listen, if you don't engage with me, if I don't see you making mistakes, then you're not going to be around me long. Right. We got to get out there. We got to push the edge of the envelope. So you have to help reinvent my company, because there's a mantra I have had for decades, and that is, if Jerry had been successful the past 10 years by doing this pattern, this process, this protocol, then I guarantee you, if you continue doing that, you will fail. Yeah. So change, and ever changing, is the continuous way to success. And that is where the young energy gets in. So what we have to do, if we want to call us business mentors or the aged and the wise, and I paraphrase that, is to get out and engage with, invest in, guide, direct, mentor all of these young, energetic souls and let them manifest their destiny, because they will teach us stuff that we've never even thought about.
Charlie, it's funny. Sorry, I had envisioned, in retirement, I'm 55 now. I've got all kinds of books. I want to sit in a chair and read. Well, during the pandemic, I had lots of time. And when I came out of the pandemic, honest to God, I couldn't wait to start getting back to what I have done in my career, which is pick up the phone, talk to business people, and sell them something of value. So it's been interesting, because I look at someone like yourself. You say you're 68, you've had 140 businesses, you've been very successful. But to sit around and look at your bank account or whatever makes you happy, like that doesn't make you happy. What I've learned, and I'm so curious about entrepreneurs like yourself. I look at them, what keeps them going? But I guess it's the fear of doing nothing would be kill someone like you, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but that's not so true either. If you are balanced, there's not the
Yeah.
fear of doing nothing. So to sit back and to do nothing is possible. Like it's again being in that moment. Last week on a Monday, I decided to do a bit more exercise than usual. So I'm in the gym at 6:30, did a training session. Had a personal trainer come in who's into elasticity, stretching, and his mandate is to increase my power for cycling by 10%. That was 2:30 to 3:30, and it was nice outside. I said, cool. I got on my bike and I biked for an hour. So I fit in and do that. Or I can come and sit back and meditate for a half an hour, or I can sit back and take up a book and write, or I can sit down and write poetry. Like the thing is to have a choice to do or not do is the biggest thing. And people who sit down and look at their money and count their money is like, that's not what we're about. It's how do I help enhance some of these young millennials in my community?
Maybe it's a fear of not contributing or not. Yeah, I don't know. I struggle with that too, Jerry. I often wonder what makes guys like us tick, that we always want to kind of be involved in something, whether it is going for a bike ride, whether it is, in your case, writing poetry. There's always something to be done, always something, and sometimes there's nothing to be done. But it seems like always in motion. I find that people who are, and you may be right, maybe we're all entrepreneurial at some level, but we always seem to be in motion. Always seem to be in motion. And I don't know about you guys, but man, that's a good feeling to always be in motion.
Yeah, but it's also fearful in that it in its own way is creating noise. And there's a moment in time when you want to stop the noise, even though you don't know it yourself. Like one of my favorite places to be is to do a riverside meditation, which is my favorite meditation in the world. And it's simply you sit by a river, and let's say the up river's in your left ear and the down river's in your right ear, and you get yourself into the sound of the river only. So how you get there, your breathing and so on. And you actually allow the sound of the river to go in your left ear, wash through your brain, and go out the other ear. And there are different sounds, upriver and downriver. And that to me is an example of doing nothing. And to do nothing every once in a while is doing something.
Yeah.
So you can create a non-activity, change your brain to call it something. So we who tend to be entrepreneurs think we're the only ones like it. But I know that my mother was always like it. She was always doing something. She's cooking, taking care of boarders we had in our house, baking, sewing. Like, did she ever get an opportunity to sit down and do a river meditation? Perhaps in her own way she had one. I don't know. But we all need to slow it down a little tiny bit. And that's why Clovis went bang, smacked us in the face and said, hey, people, there's more to life than the rat race that you've created. You're on a treadmill and you're speeding the treadmill up a bit more every day, every year. And guess what? You're going nowhere. You're staying in the same place, but it's getting faster and faster.
Yeah.
So why not slow the treadmill down? You're going to be in the same place and experience your life. Expand those moments of time between a thought, a breath, and a heartbeat.
But Charlie, on that point, I can't help but reflect, on, I know what's made me successful for 30 years, and it is that treadmill. I guess the fear is, despite the fact that the COVID and the pandemic has made me a little more calmer, I do have the fear that I'm getting back a little bit on that treadmill. And I'm like, because that, Jerry, that's what's made you successful for 30 years. Get back there, get back and do that. I think the realization that I don't need to is something that I'm trying to come to terms with.
But redefine success.
Yeah.
like for Alan and I, we bike. So we want to go out and we want to pedal for 1 hour at 26K an hour. And we can only do 22K an hour. So in that part of our life, the definition of success would be to reach that goal of 26K an hour.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's a matter of taking the pieces of our life, spiritual, mental, intellectual, physical, business, break them all out and create, okay, what's success here? Does it affect my success there? If you, Jerry, go down that highway and Chase, go back into that, and all of a sudden you put on 25 pounds or you get stressed out or then your definition of success needs to be revisited. COVID gave us all of this breathing time to say, what's important? What's really important in my life? And yes, we have to, food, shelter, clothing, got to go priority. We're human beings. But we don't need to have food. We don't need to have 5 shelters. It's what's important, and then pull it back closer to home. And closer to home goes into yourself firstly. If you don't love and take care of yourself, then how in God's name do you take care of your partner and your children, and your friends, and your family? So starts in, works its way out. And so the definition of success is to be happy and healthy. I think 7.2 billion people would probably say that. Now you define that differently. If your partner in life has got cancer, then it's going to affect you. And what you're going to do is you're going to focus on what you can to remediate, fix, solve, ease, and deal with. And the more you do that, the more your success is. Okay? If you bring comfort to a partner, that becomes a little bit more rewarding success fee than going out making an extra 10 grand while your partner's home suffering. So we got to revisit the personal pieces of life. And Alan, you've been in a career and you back out, you can buy in on this. And what happens is we age, most of us, to pick up a bit of wisdom. I was fortunate enough to pick that wisdom up at a young age and carry it with me. And I try to get everybody, listen, slow down. You are going to be the bug in the windshield with me sometime. So why not, live it to the fullest, but balanced.
The balance piece, right? That is in essence the key. For me, it's the key to it all. And I always describe it as that perfect kind of mixture of work and life. And I used to, the old terms were work-life balance. And that never resonated with me because it was too compartmentalized. I think it's all part and parcel. Everything has to meld together nicely. And I find I'm there now. I find like I'm there now. I'm the type of guy, and I say to my wife, say this often, because when I was traveling in places like Pakistan and Nepal and find myself in unusual situations, there was times when I would call her and say, I don't think I'm coming home. This is it. This is goodbye. Like, I'm not going to make it out of this situation. I did that a number of times with her in the last few years. But every time I did that, in my mind, in my heart, I was peaceful with where I was. I felt like this is a good place I'm in. And if it ends right now, for me, I'm okay. It's all okay. And I reflect back on that sometimes and think to myself, I think that's it. That's the place. I think that's the balance. And now and realizing that you might be there is important too, right? Because sometimes all these things are happening around us and you don't realize exactly where you are in the moment. Charlie, this has been a remarkable conversation. I didn't know where it was going to go, and I'm certainly glad we went down these paths. I'm looking forward to another one of these. I'd like to try to get you on another one of these podcasts. We always ask our guests, and this is a complicated thing because it's very difficult to boil everything down to one point, but we always try to ask our guests to leave the audience with one small takeaway. What is that one piece of advice that a guy like you who has great experiences, has done a lot of things in life, you're at a point in time now, what is that one piece of advice you might give young Charlie Oliver who walked back into university after losing his brother? And what is that one piece of advice you would give to him? And indeed, what is that you would give to our audience?
It's probably an easier question than Lex Friedman asks all of his guys, which is, what is the meaning of life? The simplest answer to that comes to mind is to listen to your inner voice. That's the part that's inside you, and your voice will speak to you whether you're dreaming at night or when you meditate. We can call it your conscience. We can call it your inner belief system, but you listen to that voice. So if you're making a decision in life and you ask yourself, should I do this or not? Does this resonate with me? And the buzz says, I feel uncomfortable about it, or it's great. Listen to the inner voice. And that moves us through all aspects of life again. So not just in your business, but in your relationship and your health and your decisions to go or not go to a trip, a conversation, and that goes, do I say this or do I not say this? So listen to your inner voice. And that, I think, is one of many pieces of advice we can pass on. And like I said, if we do this again in the future, we'll probably hone in on one subset of what we've covered. This has been like a potpourri, a menagerie of different topics woven into a great conversation.
It's designed to excite the audience, Charlie, so they'll come back and want more.
I can't help but thinking we called it GaleForceWins, WINS, and who knows, gales move and blow in all kinds of directions, but I can't think of a better guest to be on a podcast called GaleForceWins than you, Charlie. And I think I really, really appreciate you being on. Alan, do you want to say what you often say to our guests to end it?
Listen, Charlie, we always have wonderful people on board, and I always end it the same way, and that is the world needs more Charlie Oliver. Thank you very much for joining us on GaleForceWins. An absolute pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, and end it with namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you for tuning in to GaleForceWins. That's GaleForceWins, WINS.com.